Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. We are excited to have you here for this Clinical Instructor Internship, or CI2 as we call it, information session and Q&A. I'm Rebecca Bedeau. I am the Director for Strategic Communications here at the Betty Irene Moore School of Nursing at UC Davis. And if you've been considering a move from bedside nursing into clinical education, or you're simply exploring what a teaching role might look like, this session is designed with you in mind. The CI2 program is funded through a Department of Labor nursing expansion grant that we refer to as RETAIN. And it really was created to support nurses who want to transition into clinical instructor positions. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll walk you through what our program offers, who's eligible, and how to apply. And we have reserved plenty of time for questions, so we will eagerly answer those. Before we begin, a few housekeeping things. This presentation is in webinar format, so you are muted. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen next to the chat to submit your questions throughout the session, and our team will address them during our dedicated Q&A time. We've also enabled closed captioning, so you can have the option to turn that on if you'd like. And the Show Captions button is also located on the bottom toolbar of your Zoom window. Also, we are recording this webinar today. It will be posted on our website shortly after the session, and you can review it later or possibly share it with colleagues who may be interested in the program but were not able to attend it today. Next slide, please. So here's a brief summary of what we have planned for today's session. We'll begin with welcome and introductions, where I will share who's on our panel so you know which team members are here to support you and answer your questions about the CI2 program. Then we'll dive into the RETAIN and CI2 program overview. We'll explain what the Clinical Instructor Internship is, how it's funded through the RETAIN grant, and what the experience looks like for participants. Next, we will open the floor for that Q&A that I mentioned, and this really is your time to ask about anything: program details, eligibility requirements, what the day-to-day experience looks like for our interns, or the application process. And finally, we will cover that application information, including important dates, required materials, and the steps you'll need to take if you, in fact, decide to apply. And we certainly hope that you will. So let me introduce the team members who are here with us today. That is me, my photo on the left side of your screen. Pictured next to me in the center, I would like to introduce Dr. Deb Bakurjian. She directs the RETAIN program, and she also serves as our Associate Dean for Practice, where she oversees the School of Nursing's clinical enterprise and leads strategic health system partnership. And finally, pictured to the right is Jennifer Edwards, our Director for Clinical Simulation and an Assistant Clinical Professor. In her faculty role, Jen leads the Healthy Communities and the preceptorship courses for our Master's Entry program in Nursing, which involves our clinical instructor interns. As the Director for Clinical Simulation, she collaborates with faculty and staff across the school to develop and deliver simulation-based education and champion simulation best practices. So thank you very much to our panelists for being here today and for sharing your expertise. So now I am pleased to turn it over to Dr. Bakurjian, who will give an overview of the RETAIN CI2 program. Deb?
Thank you, Rebecca. So welcome, everybody. Let me give you some context about the RETAIN program. RETAIN stands for Residency in Education, Teaching, and Instruction in Nursing. This is a U.S. Department of Labor nursing expansion program, as Rebecca said, and it has two primary goals. The first is to expand the pipeline of highly qualified nursing instructors and educators, and second, to increase the capacity for new student nurse admissions across our region. The program was created in direct response to the critical shortage of nursing educators, and it's designed to make the transition into clinical teaching not only accessible, but also well supported and achievable for practicing nurses. This is a $6 million award spanning 5 years from 2023 to 2028. So we're right in the middle of this grant. And our enrollment will be concluding in May of 2027. So we hope we will have everybody enrolled by that time for the final year of the program. Through Retain, we aim to graduate 48 clinical instructor interns working in partnership with our other schools of nursing in Northern California, area health systems, and local nursing organizations. These partnerships enrich the program and help us to connect with diverse nursing communities across Northern California. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we're introducing the Clinical Instructor Internship, or the CI2 program as we fondly refer to it. Again, the overall goal is that by the program end, applicants are prepared to serve as clinical instructors, either in an ADN, a BSN, or a master's entry program in nursing, all of which are pre-licensure RN programs. So in this program, our graduates will end up with specialized skills needed to teach and guide the next generation of nurses. This slide also outlines how your time will be spent, with about half of your time devoted to relevant learning activities such as online coursework and simulation training. The other half is spent on in-person clinical sessions with pre-licensure RN students, which are supervised by an experienced clinical instructor. Over the course of the program, you will complete at least 90 hours with an experienced clinical instructor preceptor. And then this slide also shows that this is a paid traineeship with for a total of $14,000, which are provided in two different payments, $7,000 each. One payment is made after the first 7 weeks, and the second payment is made at the completion of the program. In addition, needs-based supportive funds are available, which are capped at $5,000 per participant. And then each of the participants can apply for those funds, and we have guidelines about that. And finally, please note that there is no tuition reimbursement for the CI2 program. Next slide. So let's review the basic eligibility requirements for the CI2 program. First of all, applicants must have a valid, current, and active RN license through the California Board of Registered Nursing. Also, a bachelor's or master's degree in nursing is required by the program start date. Next, you must have at least 1 year of continuous full-time experience as an RN within the past 5 years. Interns need to be available to participate in all of the program activities through the entire 14-week time frame. So please note, taking vacation during this time frame is not permitted at all. Finally, each participant must meet all of the prerequisites to serve as a clinical instructor. This includes having a current BLS certification, passing a background check, being fully immunized, and completing any specialized training required by their assigned clinical rotation site. Next slide. So on this slide, we're outlining which employment statuses qualify for the Retain CI2 program, and these come from the Department of Labor. The table is organized with employment status on the left column and the eligibility details in the right column. At the top, we're first going to talk about participants that cannot be participating in the program. So you cannot be employed full-time. And full-time is defined specifically as 1 full-time equivalent, or for nurses that are working 12-hour shifts, it's 0.9 full-time equivalents. So you cannot be employed at that level. The maximum amount you can work is 0.8 FTE, which is the equivalent of 4 days per week in a regular work day. But that would be challenging due to the time commitment. So if you can imagine that the amount of time that we're requiring for the program and then trying to work 4 days a week on top of that would be very challenging. The program is meant to be the priority, so keeping outside work to half-time or less is probably the most reasonable approach. Next, current or previous employment as faculty or as a clinical instructor is also not allowed in this program, and therefore, if you've had those experiences, you will not qualify to participate. The next three categories are shown as qualifying, and they are highlighted in green on the slide. The first is unemployed. So if you're unemployed as a nurse, that is perfectly acceptable, and you can come into this program. So that means a registered nurse who is currently without a job and is available for work. The second qualifying category is underemployed. So this includes nurses who are employed but not doing a full-time job during the program, or they may be working just per diem as well. So those all qualify as underemployed. The third qualifying category is incumbent. Now, incumbent workers may qualify if they are employed full-time, but their employer has an agreement with UC Davis Nurse School of Nursing to upskill them into a clinical instructor role. At the bottom of the slide, there's an important note that states that employees of UC Davis Health are now eligible to apply for the retain program. That was not something that was true at the very beginning, but that is true currently. So now I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer to review our CI2 program outcomes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deb, and hello, everyone. Let's take a closer look at what outcomes participants can expect from the CI2 program. So by the end of the internship, graduates leave with both practical teaching experience and a well-rounded set of academic and instructional skills. They are prepared to bridge clinical practice with effective teaching strategies. This slide is divided into two sections, each describing what interns will do in a different learning environment. So the first section is the one at the top in teal, and it focuses on the clinical setting. So in the clinical setting, interns implement essential tools and techniques, including debriefing tools to foster reflection and deeper understanding, communication strategies for a range of clinical situations, and group management techniques to support effective learning environments. They also learn how to foster the transition of pre-licensure nursing students from the novice level to the advanced beginner level. The second section is shown in purple, and it focuses on skills labs and simulations. In skills labs and simulations, the interns work to bridge clinical and teaching strategies, and they practice aligning course objectives with clinical experiences so that classroom learning connects directly to what students see in clinical practice. Altogether, these outcomes ensure that CI2 graduates are ready to step into clinical instructor roles with confidence, equipped with the theoretical foundation, practical skills, and relational experience they need to lead, inspire, and support the next generation of nurses. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about how learning happens during the CI2 program. So this slide is organized into two large boxes, one for didactic education on the left, and one for precepting with a clinical instructor on the right, which are our in-person clinical sessions. On the didactic education side, interns participate in an online course that consists of asynchronous modules. The course is titled Becoming an Academic Clinical Nurse Educator and was developed by Dr. Susan Knowles. In addition to the online course, interns take part in synchronous education focused on simulation debriefing through the Western States Simulation Alliance. These live sessions give interns a chance to actively practice debriefing and reflect on simulated clinical scenarios in real time. On the right, the slide describes learning that happens during in-person clinical sessions with pre-licensure nursing students in their clinical setting. CI2s will partner with a course instructor of record, often called the IOR, and with an experienced clinical instructor who will be their preceptor. Through this partnership, they gain real teaching experience in the clinical environment while working with a student cohort. So by combining the online coursework, synchronous simulation debriefing, and mentored clinical teaching, the CI2 program supports both the knowledge and the hands-on experience interns need to grow into confident clinical educators. I will now turn it back to Dr. Bakurjian to expand on the time commitment and expectations for the CI2 program.
Thanks, Jen. So this slide outlines the time commitment and expectations for clinical instructor interns. At the top of the slide, it notes that the CI2s will spend approximately 20 to 30 hours per week on program activities. And this is really dependent upon what school you and program that you're assigned to. The first group of bullets describes the clinical experiences with students. Interns will participate in multiple in-person clinical experiences with students, completing at least 90 hours with an experienced clinical instructor preceptor. These clinical experiences may take place at a variety of different clinical sites in the greater Sacramento region or in greater regional areas associated with the School of Nursing that you're placed at. Clinical rotation shifts may occur during the day, at night, or on the weekends. So that, again, depends on the site that you're assigned to. At the start of the program, there may also be additional activities beyond that 1 day per week, such as skills training or student preparation periods. The second group of bullets highlight didactic experience. These include self-paced asynchronous modules as well as synchronous sessions. CI2s are expected to attend mandatory in-person events, including the orientation and onboarding at the beginning of the program and an end of the program poster presentation and offboarding session. Together, these clinical and didactic expectations give you a realistic picture of the time involved and the variety of learning experiences you can expect throughout the CI2 program. Next slide. This slide is titled Program Structure at a Glance. It gives you an overview of what happens in the CI2 program during weeks 1, weeks 2 through 13, and week 14. At the top, there's the gold bar that's labeled week 1, on-campus orientation. Underneath, it shows that these are 2 days of in-person sessions. During this orientation, interns receive a program overview and an introduction to the clinical instructor role and the NLN competencies. The middle section covers weeks 2 through 13, which we're titling Core Learning and Clinical Sessions. These are typically hybrid, combining clinical experiences, synchronous sessions, and asynchronous learning and prep sessions. Activities included during this period are clinical sessions with the RN pre-licensure students, participation in the Academic Clinical Nurse Educator Preparation Program, which is a certificate program that Jen described. This is Dr. Knoll's asynchronous program. There's also simulation and skills development, peer-to-peer discussions and faculty check-ins, and ongoing competency tracking, self-assessments, and evaluations. So it is a lot of time that you need to commit to this program. The bottom section is week 14, program completion and transition. The format for this week, final week, is an in-person, typically 1 day. During this time, interns complete a poster and oral presentation and participate in a program completion celebration. Overall, this slide summarizes how the program moves from the initial orientation and onboarding through core hybrid learning and clinical practice, and finally into completion and transition activities by week 14. Next slide. This slide displays assignments based on areas of focus for the fall term. Across the top of the table, there are 3 columns for our partner institutions, UC Davis, Sac State, and Sierra College. Down the left side, the rows list 6 possible areas of focus: medical surgical, obstetrics, pediatrics, community health, psychiatry, mental health, and geriatrics. In terms of what's offered where, both med-surg and psych mental health are available at all 3 of the partner schools. Sac State offers additional areas, including obstetrics, pediatrics, and community health. Currently, Sierra College is the only school of nursing offering geriatrics in the fall. While not pictured here, Sonoma State will also be a partner this fall, and we're just getting together with them to find out what they have available. So we don't yet have their specific area of focus. That information will be coming available in the next few weeks. Now I'm going to let Rebecca share an exciting Retain program update regarding one of our recent CI2 graduates.
Thank you, Deb. We'd like to highlight some of the Retain program successes because what can you expect after this 14 weeks? We recently had a CI2 graduate accept a clinical instructor position at Sierra College. Philip is seen here holding his certificate of completion with Deb smiling next to him after he finished the program. And this is what he had to say. He really explains that this internship strengthened his passion for teaching and for helping to shape future nurses. He says, working closely with student nurses during clinical rotations helped build stronger communication, patience, and adaptability while also reinforcing his clinical knowledge. He goes on to describe how the experience really underscored the importance of supportive mentorship in building confident and competent nursing students. Finally, he notes that the internship empowered him to become a more effective nurse and clinical instructor and really solidified his commitment to guiding and supporting student nurses in their academic journey. Both the quote and the photo together really illustrate how this CI2 program not only prepares nurses for clinical instructor roles, but also supports real career advancement like Philip's new CI position at Sierra College. All right. So now you've heard the nuts and bolts of the program. You've heard what one of the graduates thinks about it and the wonderful success he had in landing a position. So we do want to open up the floor to some questions. Again, at the very bottom of your screen in that Zoom window, there is a Q&A function. Type whatever is on your mind in there. And we already have one. So what I'll do is either Deb or Jen will chime in with whoever wants to take this question. But I will direct this first one to you, Deb. Who are some of the clinical partners where interns might be rotating in the clinical setting?
So we are partnered with several of the schools of nursing. And then, I've already mentioned Sacramento State. We also have Sonoma State, Sierra College. We're also looking at the community colleges in the Sacramento region, American River College and Sacramento City College. So quite a few different partners that we're working with. And with each one of those partners, they have obviously their own way that they put their programs together. So most of the programs have very similar topics because they're required, right? These rotations are required by the Board of Registered Nursing. So you commonly will see medical, surgical, obstetrics, pediatrics, mental health, community health. But they're often in different time periods. So some of them offer courses during a particular semester, or another college might have it in a separate or a different semester. And then, of course, our college is on a quarter system, so we offer our programs at a slightly different type of schedule. So you could be partnered with any one of those. We do try to take in your preferences. So if you put a preference that I'd like to go to Sacramento State, we try to honor that if we can.
That was one of the questions we got. Do you get to choose where your clinicals are? So you are taking that into consideration while you're placing interns around the area throughout the program, correct?
Yes, absolutely. We try very hard to place you somewhere that you want to be. Often it's what's close to your home, but it may also be someplace that you either attended school or where you would like to work. And so we do try to honor that.
I know we're looking for nurses with experience. We have a question. Does that experience have to be in a clinical setting, or could it be in case management or advice nursing? Do those qualify?
Well, I think we really try to be very open to all the experiences that nurses have. The Board of Registered Nursing really wants nurses to be clinical instructors um, to make sure that they've had at least a year of clinical nursing within the prior 5 years. So we do have that part as part of our criteria. We do also take all of these things into account. So if your clinical nursing was 5.5 years ago, we might be able to fit that in. But you need to have had some kind of clinical nursing experience somewhere in some kind of setting.
Another qualification question. Does an ADN plus a bachelor's in biological sciences qualify?
It does. If you have an ADN and you have a bachelor's degree in some other area, you will qualify, but you might need a waiver. So again, it's very interesting because we're so short of clinical instructors and faculty. Um, Sometimes we can get waivers for these kinds of things. I will say it's also very dependent on the school. If the schools are very set on anybody that comes to that school must have a BSN or an MSN, then we will follow that. But I've already talked to some of the program directors, particularly in our community college, who have shared that they're able to get waivers for these positions.
Often we talk about hand holding and supporting and guiding through a program. Jen, here's a question I think is best for you. Folks have been practicing nurses and now they're going back into a learner role to then become an educator. So there's a lot of different role shifting happening. Can you explain through the didactic and the clinical setting, maybe how that support is there during the 14-week period so no one's feeling left behind?
Absolutely. And, I think it's always, I have found it personally a humbling experience to go from being an expert in something to then coming back to a learner role. And I think our program does a really nice job of creating that safe space and the same safe space that we want our clinical instructors to create for our students. We aim to create for our CI2 interns as well. And so I think the things that I might highlight are there's lots of sort of the foundational theoretical content. We mentioned the Dr. Knowles modules, I think offer some really good practical foundational understanding of some of the educational principles that CI2s can then implement. And that, because you're working one-on-one with a preceptor as an intern, I think it offers a really nice opportunity to give structured, kind of progressive training, where we can also customize the focus on the areas that each individual needs support in, right? So everyone's going to bring in some areas where they feel really confident working with students and some areas where they feel like they need a little bit more support. And because you have a one-on-one mentor to work with, I think it allows us to really customize that experience and ensure that the CI2s are getting the experience that is going to be beneficial for them. We include simulations to practice some of those tools and skills before our interns are working with the students, which I think is also a way to help things feel a little safer. And just, I think the team has put together just a very comprehensive, supportive training program with the goal of really helping interns feel comfortable and finish the program feeling ready to jump into that first CI2 role.
I'm also always amazed at how cohesive the interns become with one another. They don't only lean on the expertise of our wonderful team, which I would be remiss if I didn't mention the staff and the incredible support team behind the scenes, but also, our preceptors and all the clinical sites that they're working with. But they really do form a community that then benefits them once they even leave the internship. Jen, have you heard back from students who have felt?
Absolutely. I think, what I've noticed is that absolutely the interns connect with each other. We've had some interns that have gone on and had interest in some other programs or have kept in touch and support with each other. I think that's the joy of having a cohort model, um, even though the interns, like I said, are one-on-one with their preceptors, they do engage and with each other and go through as a cohort. So you get to know other people who have a shared passion and interest in working with students as well.
Thank you for rounding that out. Deb, a couple more qualification questions. How about experience as a dialysis nurse or a home health nurse? Would that qualify?
It any nursing experience you have is going to qualify. The issue becomes where we place you. And again, you have to have had some clinical nursing, which dialysis nursing is clinical nursing, right, within the last 5 years. So likely what would happen, we also get this question because people work in the intensive care unit, right? We don't typically place clinical instructors in our students in intensive care, but sometimes that does happen. So mostly will get placed in a med surge area, not one of the specialty areas like obstetrics or pediatrics or mental health. When you have these different clinical sites, like your background is either intensive care unit or your background is in dialysis nursing, for example, we would place you in med surge.
So here's a couple of questions about that clinical setting experience in order to be eligible for the program. We have someone who hasn't worked in 10 years. Is
Mm.
there a way to help get that 1 year clinical experience? And then someone else is asking, would doing a nurse refresher course take the place of that clinical setting?
Those are really good questions. I don't know. I don't know whether there would be some kind of if you haven't worked in 10 years, you're not going to qualify for this program. So you have to have had a year's worth of clinical nursing within the past 5 years. So can you go out and get a job of a nursing job? That's really would be the option. I don't I don't think that volunteering will qualify. So that could be a problem. I think if you haven't had any experience, the only way that you're going to qualify is to go out and get a year's worth of experience. So get hired somewhere, work as a nurse for at least a year, and that would give you the qualifications that you would need. And so, Rebecca, what was the second?
It was, and our participant may want to follow up with this, but the question was, would a nurse refresher
Oh,
course take the
mm.
place of a clinical setting?
Well, I don't think so, because a nurse refresher course is, um, while it's good, I don't recall that they are 12 months in length. They're usually shorter than that period of time. I think if you've got a nurse refresher course that lasts for 12 months and it's a mixture of that you're in a clinical setting for the year, I think it would fit. But I'm not sure that those programs exist in that way out there for that whole 12-month period of time. But we'd be happy to talk one-on-one with anybody about these sort of very specific environments and sort of brainstorm together about what we might be able to come up with. Some of what we have to do, and we've had to do it, I mentioned one of the things that, when we started, UC Davis employees were not allowed to participate in the program. So we went back to the Department of Labor and negotiated that. So some of these things we maybe could negotiate. We would just have to take these one-offs and go back to the Department of Labor and see if we can get an exception to policy.
And it's in, oh, I'm sorry, continue.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and sort of for the context of this, right, and that requirement for experience is that clinical instructors, if they're placed on a medical surgical unit, need to be able to supervise the students there performing the tasks that that are necessary on that unit. So it's important that nurses that are responsible for supervising the practice of students are also comfortable doing those skills as well. So that's some of the reason for the requirement.
That's
Yeah,
good
and
context.
let me just add one other thing to that, because Jen, you're right on about that. So imagine you haven't worked in 10 years. Imagine the technology that's changed over the last 10 years. And now you've got, IV pumps that have libraries on them. Things have changed a lot. There's all the new medications and different ways that we do things. So I can tell you, I could not go back in and be a clinical instructor. Even with my years of nursing experience, I would feel very uncomfortable. So there are really good reasons for having your clinical experience be more recent.
You talk about what's changed in the last 10 years. What's changed in the last 10 months? I mean, it is just like exponentially changing. Um, I don't see any other questions, so I'll do one last call out for our participants. If anyone wants to, if they've been weighing whether or not they want to throw it in there, put it up there. I will ask, this is something that we've gotten in other information sessions, so I'll throw this out. If someone works full-time, but their manager is willing to accommodate the program by granting time off during the 14 weeks, is that acceptable?
They would have to actually officially reduce their time, because we have to be able to report that to the Department of Labor.
Okay, good to know. No other questions going in. So thank you, Deb and Jen, for always thorough answers. But I want to wrap it up, because some of the other questions we got are, what are the nuts and bolts and what's happening and how do I apply? So this is what you will need to do to apply for the CI2 program and how to stay connected with us. Okay, on the left hand of your slide, we're going to outline those steps. First, we ask that you review all admission and program requirements, including eligibility criteria and the deadlines. Then you'll complete an online application and upload the required materials, which include a cover letter, your CV or resume, and contact information for 2 references. Now, our applications are due on May 25th for the fall 2026 cohort, and the program begins on August the 31st. Now, there's a barcode you see on the right-hand side of your screen, and that will link you directly to our application page. But in case you don't find that QR code helpful, let me give you the exact URL. It's https://health.ucdavis.edu/nursing/academics/retain. Or is that a forward slash? I might need to be corrected. I've always considered that a backslash, but now it could be forward, but it goes from the top right down to the bottom left. And there are many ways to stay connected with us, and we'd love for you to stay in touch, because you may have those very unique one-on-one kind of individual questions. So let's go to the next slide, and I will show you ways that you can stay in touch with us. We have our program email address, which is retain@health.ucdavis.edu. And if you want to stay connected and get updates, maybe May 25th is too soon for you. Maybe you're not ready to start this fall. Maybe you need to get a year experience under your belt before applying again. You can register for our updates. Again, that QR code, if you're able. If not, https:// our slashes from upper right to bottom left, 2 of them, signup.e2ma.net/signup/ here's the number 200-4146/26919. We have an incredible team, both the educators that you've met today and the staff team who work diligently behind the scenes, who field these questions from the emails, who continuously work so that we can get people situated and ready for the program. Because we know if you're joining us today, you have the heart to want to influence and impact the next generation of nurses. And by being a clinical instructor, it gives you the pathway to do that. So we hope that this has been helpful. We hope that you will reach out to us if you have any questions. And until then, we hope you stay well.